Hey guys, welcome to Woman of Purpose podcast. I'm Sharp Pittman, your host, and I am really excited about this episode. I have with me a friend, Peggy Nunley, and I just met her actually this weekend, and it's really interesting how people that don't know each other and you get together and you start talking and you realize how much your story really is similar, and so I'm just really excited that you took this time to be able to be with us and share a little bit about yourself. So if you just want to introduce yourself, Peggy, and just a little bit about what you do, that would be great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Wow, what a privilege and a joy to be here. I've really enjoyed getting to know you and your husband and your family and your church. And so, my name's Peggy Nunley, and I'm originally born in Kentucky, raised in southern Indiana, but live in Oklahoma now. And I am president of All Star Missions, which is a discipleship ministry. So we disciple students. It's been around for about 30 years. But we mobilize and we disciple youth all around the world. And we also take medical trips into restricted access places, North Africa, the Middle East. And then our latest kind of endeavor has been women's ministry and discipling and mentoring women, training and equipping them, and then launching them in ministry out in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's really my heart too. I love that, how you really empower women to be able to overcome challenges in our past and trauma and stuff like that, to be able to actually, live and enjoy life and do what they're called and designed to do. So that's something that you've done in Las Vegas. You just did one in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, no, actually last week. Yeah, we took a team out there. We had about 15 women. And basically what we do is we take our mornings and we do discipleship. And so during that time, my heart and passion is just really to pour into women, help them to find their true identity, help them to really step into their calling and purpose. A lot of women have laid that down. You know, they got married, they started having children, and somehow got lost in that. And I see that with a lot of women. And so for them to be able to come back to this place where they just come back to their first love in Christ, but also to see again that God has calling and purpose that never stopped.
Yeah.
And then we go to the streets of Las Vegas. We minister to showgirls, to escorts, and we do street worship, teach women how to share their story. And we're just seeing women get set free on the Vegas Strip.
That's really cool. Maybe I'll join you one time
you
doing
have
that.
to.
That's really amazing. We talked a little bit last night, Peggy, when you were over, and we were talking kind of about your story and how you really are drawn to this generation, because it's the generation that they call it a fatherless generation, and you're drawn to that because a little bit of your background and how you were raised. Can you just share just a little bit about your background?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I really do believe that that's a part of why I have such a heart and a passion to see this generation have an encounter with Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, I was raised in a very broken home, which is actually not that uncommon today. A lot of people, right, there's not really, there is no perfect home.
Right.
However, the circumstances of my home was just very, it was hard. You know, I grew up in domestic violence, sexual abuse. I was put into the foster care system for a while. My mom went to prison. You know, I watched my mom actually attempt suicide more than once, and really prayed that she would come through it.
Yeah.
And, you know, just really a dark time of my life. And, you know, I had an encounter with Jesus when I was 7. I didn't have a church background, and so my family would go to church, but because of the domestic violence, we moved all the time. I probably went to 20 schools. And so there was just a lot of things I started believing about myself that wasn't the truth. When you grow up in that, you know, you begin to have this belief system that you're not smart, you know, that you're not good enough, that you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And so as I, got older, that was something that I really needed the Lord to touch me in.
Yeah. Yeah. So you lived in an environment that really marked you, and it identified you, and it lied to you and told you who you were. It's interesting how we can grow up in a family, grow up in an environment, and we don't realize the degree it marked us until we try to start doing life.
Right.
You know, and then as you start doing life, then we realize the lies we believed and that that's not normal.
Right.
You know, you believed that the way that you were raised, and, you know, you mentioned it last night too, how there was a time when you were like, this isn't normal.
Right.
You know, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, you know, growing up, you know, to me, if you know, the police showed up at my home, and there was one time that my stepdad got really violently drunk and chased us around with a sawed-off shotgun, and you know, the police showed up like they always did. And, you know, at that time, you know, and there's a lot of really good resources now, you know, as I, you know, minister to women, you know, I can encourage them that there are safe houses, there's places for them to go, there's resources. But at that time, there really wasn't.
Right.
So we would leave, we slept in our car, and the next day I go to school. And I just thought that was normal.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I really, you know, as I started getting older, I started realizing, wait a minute, like, not every woman gets beat up.
Yeah.
You know, not every kid has been abused by their father. You know, not everybody walks in this sense of rejection and abandonment.
Yeah.
And as I began to see healthy people, especially in the church, it really highlighted to me how unhealthy I was.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because you said your stepfather was abusive, but your biological father was also abusive. So your mom went from one abusive situation to another abusive situation.
Yeah.
And brought you guys in. So really, you were brought up in a home that you were brought up in a family, but you really were an orphan. And the very people that should protect you and should keep you safe didn't.
Right.
How did that affect you?
Oh, I mean, well, you know, orphans don't know who they are. They don't know where they belong. They don't know what their purpose is. And, you know, when you actually study about orphans in the Bible, it is the fatherless. You'll find that, you know, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, that God's heart is after the fatherless. And so it's not those that, you know, sometimes we try to say, well, a real orphan is someone that doesn't have a mother, that doesn't have a father. But that's actually not the truth. It was children being raised that fathers were not present or mothers were not present. Or because of the trauma of their past, you know, hurt people hurt people. You know, my mom did the best she could.
Yeah.
And, you know, I look at my mom and, you know, I would never want to say to her, you know, you were an awful mom. I would never say that. I knew my mom loved me.
Yeah.
And to the best degree she knew, she was trying to protect me. But, you know, when we grow up in environments of abuse and we grow up in environments of abandonment with this, what I call an orphan spirit, then, you know, our operating system for truth is actually a lie, but we don't know it.
Yeah.
And so that lie permeates every part of who we are. And so we move into this place, even in parenting, where we're trying to protect our children, but we have no idea that we have opened ourselves up through agreements that we've made because we were rejected, we were abandoned, we were abused, or we grew up without identity.
Yeah.
And so we open the door for the enemy to run havoc on our life. And so we operate with a double mind.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw my mom operating with. And so though she was trying her best and loving us the best way she knew how, she couldn't protect us from the things that she didn't know how to protect us from. And so that orphan spirit, you know, it permeates every part of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it marks you to such a degree that even the way that you see things, the way that you approach things, all of it, and little kids, being a little girl, growing up in a home to that degree, the abuse, you know, the domestic violence and all of that, it's like you somehow, I bet you thought something was wrong with you.
Right.
Like, what did I do wrong? What could I do different? And so in that, I know that, you know, everybody responds differently. In that situation, did it make you like more quiet? Did it make you, how did you respond in that as a little girl?
Well, I was very shy. I was very backwards. And, I didn't have very many friends. When you move a lot, when you are taken out of places that feel safe, I didn't have an environment, so I studied sociology. And one of the things I learned that's so significant for children is they have to have a sense of felt safety.
Yeah.
There has to be some type of routine, and routine actually helps people feel very safe.
Yeah.
And so we gravitate toward that. But when you grow up in domestic violence, you live in this trauma mindset and you don't even realize it. And so there's not this sense that I'm safe anywhere. And so I was very shy, backwards. I didn't know who I could trust. When your innocence is stolen by authorities when you're young, then you have a mistrust of authority as you get older.
Yeah.
And, one of the things I really believe is that the enemy starts when we're young to destroy the purpose of God when we get older. And one of the things that gave me such great confidence as I began to come out of my abuse and come out of this thinking that was so backwards was that God must have a plan for my life, or else the enemy would not have attacked it so much growing up.
Yeah.
And it really gave me hope that, man, the enemy must have really, and I don't know how much the enemy knows. I don't know how much Satan knows. I know that before he was cast down, he was in eternity with God. And so I would imagine that, he saw a lot of things when he was there. And so now he's operating, in time. He doesn't know everything, but I sense that he has an idea who's been marked by the Lord. And so he just goes after those that are young. And sometimes it's very confusing because you really have to face this sense of, you feel a lot of injustice, because when you struggle with that authority that's been violated in your home, it really moves to your relationship with God.
Yeah. Well, it gives you a perverted or distorted, I should say, view of God. And I think that when we grow up in an abusive home, and in my case, an alcoholic father, and a little bit different than yours, but kind of the same, you question, number one, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Am I not worth being loved? Am I broken? Especially sexual abuse, there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Then we don't realize that we've been a victim, but we grow up thinking we're broken and we're damaged goods.
Right.
And so then being a little kid, we don't have words and verbiage for that.
Right.
How do you tell yourself, I'm okay when your dad's beating you up, or I'm okay when somebody that you love is taking advantage of you when you're little. And so, like, being little, kids don't have the mindset or to put that into, I'm okay. So I think we grow up and we see, like, I don't know about for you, but like when you did go to somebody's house, never have anybody over to my house because,
Right.
you did, you wanted to try to avoid
Same
that.
story.
It's like, no, let's, how about I come to your house, And then even in that felt like I didn't fit in, or like I really didn't belong, because their house was peaceful. And like, even though it's peaceful there, and the inside, I don't know about you, but the inside of me was always chaotic. Always had this sense of like, if I wasn't around chaos, I felt like I didn't belong or didn't fit in.
Right.
Because that was normal. The yelling and the screaming, and sometimes not even the yelling and the screaming, sometimes the silence.
It's scary.
It's all scary, because growing up in a home that, like you were talking about, that was normal. Now it's not normal. It marks us to such a degree. We put something on our heart that says, I'm not worthy, I'm not valuable, I'm not loved, I'm broken, I am damaged goods. Nobody's going to ever really want me. My father doesn't want me. My mother doesn't protect me. Now we're like, hindsight, we're like, yeah, we understand all of those things, but because of God. But for women that are listening to this, that they're stuck.
Right.
What I want them to get from this episode is that they don't have to stay stuck. We did a podcast or an episode last season on childhood trauma, and it went above and beyond any podcast that was listened to. It was like unbelievable, which told me that there's a lot of hurting people, not just women, but men that are hurting and don't know what to do with the trauma.
Right.
Trauma affects, I didn't realize how much trauma affects the brain. Undealt with trauma actually affects a person to a degree where your brain like doesn't function undealt with. And when I realized that, I thought there's such an urgency like in me to help women say that you're not your trauma, that there is hope for your trauma,
Right.
that no past, no childhood is so bad that we can't recover from,
Right.
that we can't overcome, that we can't rise up and become a woman with purpose, a woman of purpose, and a woman that can help somebody on the Vegas strips that is selling their bodies, that is stripping, that is doing all those things, probably because they may have a background like you and I.
Right.
And they didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah. Well, I think they start disqualified.
Yeah.
Right. And so you were saying, like, I'm not worthy. I'm not good enough. I'm damaged goods. As a kid, you don't say that. You don't have that verbiage.
Exactly.
So you don't know that's what you're identifying with. However, that becomes your belief system.
Yeah.
And so what I have seen with a lot of women as they get older is that they don't have the language to say, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
They don't have the language to say, I have a belief system that I'm damaged, but they would never say I'm damaged.
Right.
Because they haven't connected that. And I think what's so significant is that when you're able to help a woman put language to what they have felt and what they have felt really oppressed in. And because what happens is a lot of them, it's kind of a fad to have a therapist now. Everybody has a therapist. This generation, everybody needs a therapist. And it's kind of overused. But in all honesty, the reason everybody wants a therapist is because everybody has these deep-rooted emotions that they don't know what to do with. They feel very discombobulated inside. And sort of like when you were talking about going to your friend's house, I remember the first time I went to my friend's house and she sat on her dad's lap. And I remember like cringing.
What? Yeah.
I was cringing inside because I'm looking at this and I thought, what is he doing to her? To me, it was all I saw was perversion.
Yeah.
And she was just a little girl sitting in her daddy's lap, and it was innocent, and he loved her, and it was actually a beautiful thing. But I couldn't see beauty because the filter of my life was because I had been sexually abused. It was perverted.
Right.
And so, but I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
So my lens, was always looking toward men, looking toward authorities, looking, you're always living, trying to control situations. And that's one of the biggest signs of trauma is that you've got to control, because if you don't control, then you're going to be violated. You're going to be taken advantage of. And so releasing control is very hard.
Yeah.
And you actually can't have a healthy relationship with Jesus until you have learned to lay down your control and say, what it means for you to be master is that you're master of my circumstances. But I had to relearn who is God.
Yeah.
And I had to be taught from the scriptures. I just heard this morning just a podcast that I was listening to, and another lady was talking to Christine Kane. And she says, one of the things that you said that so helped me was that Jesus saved my soul, but the word of God healed my mind. And as I watch women that have dealt with a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, and sometimes, they think, well, I wasn't sexually abused, so I'm not a real trauma kid. You going through grief and loss can get you stuck at a certain age. When you go through betrayal, or maybe your parents were divorced when you were young, and somewhere you operated in a belief system, if you had just been better, If you had just listened more, and you have taken on the rejection, and you have taken on the abandonment, and you have taken on the responsibility, that's not your responsibility to carry. That belief system is in you. And so not only do we have to put language to the trauma, but we have to take them to the source of healing. And I don't believe there's any healing apart from Jesus.
I think there's a lot of really great things. I think psychiatrists are great. I think therapists are great.
Yes.
I think they have a part, but it's a part.
Right.
And it really is. I've seen so many women that have tried to do it without, and that have tried to do it with the Lord, and there really isn't any other full, complete healing. I think all of it combined, and I think that it's like, number one, I say this all the time, is you can't get healing unless you really want to get healing.
Right.
And in all of that, in all the things that you've gone through, in the way that your childhood marked you, the way that it really impacted you, is like, it really has made you who you are today.
Yes. Yeah.
And when we push through the process of, and that is, healing is a process. It's not like voila, it's all gone. It's like there's this process, there's this journey, and people are like, well, it's just a process, it's a one and done, and it's not.
No, it's not.
It's a process, and we need to actually embrace the process of, number one, what was done to us, not because we did something wrong, but broken people hurt people.
Right.
Hurting people hurt people. And when we realize that and understand that, okay, I'm not going to blame my past, I'm not going to blame what happened to me, I'm going to actually put the work in, and I'm going to take whatever responsibility I need to take to get help.
Right.
And realize that there's only one way. And if we allow the Lord to come in and to really, if we actually give him our life and say, I am willing to give you my brokenness,
right.
my shame, my guilt, all of that, he will help us put the pieces back together.
Yeah. The thing that I think about, like with therapy, helps you really be able to identify the places where it began. But therapy, apart from the gospel, only gives you coping skills.
100%.
And so it helps you to manage all of this influx of emotion that is associated with a memory that goes very deep in your soul.
Yep.
But all healing leads to the cross. And so not only when you combine, good, therapy that the therapist understands that healing comes to the cross. When you're able to utilize that and then bring the gospel, I think what happens is not only do you develop coping skills, but you actually overcome. And that is the difference of what happens when Jesus is involved in your healing.
Yeah, I think the counseling and therapy is 100%. Coping skills really helps to give you tools, but if you want to be transformed, therapy will not transform you.
Right.
Only the Word of God and knowing Jesus can transform you, And so I think the two together is the only way to go. So we're going to end this session, but the next episode, I really want to get into, Peggy, a little bit about your dad and that whole story. You shared a little bit yesterday in church, and you shared a little bit of your story about your dad and some of the things that transpired. And I really think it's a really important thing for you to share. I think it's going to really help a lot of ladies. I know it did me. It's interesting how you can, you think that you're healed from something, and then you get into a conversation with somebody that has a similar story, and you're like, oh, dang.
Right.
There's
another spot.
There's a little bit of spot there. You talked about
Yeah.
blind spots, and I really appreciated that, because it's like, it doesn't mean there's something wrong or you missed something. It just means sometimes, there's just so many things.
Yeah.
And
God is really good to us that he doesn't take us too far. It's almost like, I said this in church yesterday, that we're like an onion.
Yeah.
He peels back layers,
Yeah.
and he positions us at the right moment with the right people at the right time,
Yeah.
so that when he does highlight that area in our life that needs healing, that we're actually ready to step into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe that women listening to this podcast, they're gonna really be able to experience some more freedom in some areas. So thank you for joining us in this episode of Women of Purpose, and check us out on social media. And what else we got, Sam? Social media and contact email, okay? Email contact is contact at womanofpurpose.net, and our website is womanofpurpose.net. So stay tuned for the next episode with Peggy Nunley, and we'll catch you then.